with my confirmation students is a scavenger hunt. And I asked them to go into the sanctuary, our little sanctuary there at Faith Church, and to count the number of crosses that they find in the sanctuary. And of course, they immediately find the large cross, in front of the altar there, and the crosses on the windowsills, and the other crosses. But it's after a while, and more searching, they find crosses everywhere. The hymnals, the Bibles, the paraments. Crosses, crosses, crosses. In our little worship space of Faith Church, I think the most anyone has ever found is 120 that were discovered. I can only imagine how many are in this wonderful large worship space today. The simple cross, just two sticks placed in a T position, and yet, without doubt, it's probably the most recognizable brand icon in all of human history. No matter where you are, anywhere on this planet, the cross is a symbol. But a symbol of what? It's been carried before armies and crusades. To millions, it evokes adoration and God Himself. But also to millions, it evokes fear and subjugation. The cross is a sign of love in the purest sense, but also, when set on fire, a symbol of hate. Hope, salvation, conquest. Yet the cross Jesus hung on meant only one thing to the people of that day: death. The most horrible kind imaginable. Slow, painful, public, an unmistakable warning to all who would challenge Rome and its laws. But perhaps more than anything else, the cross was shame. Not the kind of shame that we know, not some public embarrassment or some stupid mistake or some deep, dark secret that we hide from the world. No, the shame of absolute exposure of a person, broken down to their most basic elements for all the world to see, crying and groaning and defecating and dying. And for those who put Him on the cross, that's what they saw and that's what they expected, and that's what was happening. Just one more execution, one more broken body, just like the millions that had gone on before Him and the millions that would be hung on the cross after Him. Yet for this man, this one man, this death on the cross was different, because His death on the cross had ultimate meaning. This death would change everything, would change every human life who ever lived before and after. For this death was a sacrifice of nothing less than God giving Himself and giving up the most precious thing in all of His creation for the sins of His creation. The one who was proclaimed a king when He was just a baby by the wise men. The one who was announced as God's Son at His baptism. And the one who, as He was preparing for His ministry and the Spirit drove Him into the wilderness, fasted for 40 days and was weakened and starving. And as he was tempted by Satan, first of all, with the whispering in his ear, "If you are the Son of God, then turn these stones into bread, that you wouldn't go hungry. And Jesus, as weak as he was and hungry as he was, replied, "Man does not live by bread alone. God is going to sustain me." The devil takes him up and puts him on the highest tower and says, "Go ahead and jump off. God says in his word that he's not going to let your foot hit a stone." But Jesus said, "I'm not going to put God to the test. I'm going to trust him completely in my life." And in an instant, going up on that mountaintop and showing him all the kingdoms of the world and all of their splendor and glory and wealth and power, and say, "All of this can be yours. You don't have to go out on these dusty paths. You don't have to put up with all of this opposition. You'll have it all. You can do and mold it and shape it any way you want to for the kingdom. All you have to do is bend the knee and worship me." And Jesus said, "No. Worship the Lord your God and him alone." So he made that choice, but that temptation of Satan was there to try to plant that doubt in his mind. Is he really the Son of God? In a very real sense, this horrible moment on the cross was kind of a return to that, maybe that temptation, that moment of doubt, because as he hung on the cross, Jesus, both divine and human, reached his most human moment. Because that is the most human moment when we come to the last breath. And the temptation and doubt came back to him. If you are the Son of God, what? Save yourself. Come down off of that cross. Mocked by all around him, he reached that point that we all reach in that darkest time, that utter aloneness. Where is God? In the midst of the agony, has God forsaken him? We hear that too. The losing of a loved one, breaking of a relationship, a divorce, addiction and compulsion that is beyond our control, that feeling of loneliness can be crushing. He cries out, and then silence. And then, well, all the Gospels record that moment. They say that he shouted and breathed his last. John gives us the words in English, "It is finished." But in the Greek, the Aramaic, it's a different word. It's not 3 words, it's 1. Teshaleshtele. It's a victor's shout. It's the cry of one who has won the battle, the cry of one that has come out of the darkness into the light, grasping the crown. The temple of the veil, the veil in the temple that symbolizes God's separation from his people, was torn in two. The earth shakes, the tombs open, the dead are raised. And yes, at the end of it all, the last one we would imagine, the centurion, sees all of this happening and proclaims, "Surely, truly, he's the Son of God." And in that moment, that centurion proclaims that. It represents the whole world with that great proclamation. At the glory of Jesus, his enthronement, his coronation, was not a coronation of glory and power as we see it, but the power of God, which is the brokenness of God, that sacrifice of God. Because the cross is not shame, but it is victory. It's victory over sin, the victory over the powers of the world that would claim and demand our worship. And it is our personal victory over all that would separate us from the Father. But down through the ages, what does the cross say to the followers of Jesus? What does it say to us, beginning of the 21st century? Well, it says to us what it said to everyone. And that is, it reminds us and confronts us with the tremendous price that our salvation cost. The tremendous payment that Jesus made to bring us back to God. And in that, we are called to live a different life. At the end of the film, Saving Private Ryan, there's that incredible scene of Private Ryan, now an old man with his children and grandchildren, coming back to an American cemetery in France. And as he walks along the cemetery, and we see hundreds and thousands of tombstones there of soldiers, he walks silently and stands in front of one. The tombstone of the sergeant who led the squad to mission to go and find him and bring him back to his parents. And he stands in front of this tombstone, knowing this man's sacrifice led to his freedom. And he bows his head for silent prayer and then puts his head up, and there are tears in his eyes as he cries and says, "I hope that I've lived a life that's worthy of your sacrifice." And as we think of the cross, we think of the agony. And we think that all that Christ did in his obedience to that cross, we are called also to live a life that is worthy of the price. And yet we know that for all that we try, for all of our religious activity, for all of our piety, that we simply can't do it. It's simply not a human possibility. Only God can give us the strength and the power to do that. But it is God who put his Son on the cross to take away that separation. And in his grace, that we might find strength to live that life. Amen. Amen.